Hello, everyone! Welcome to Tuesday D&D. I am your host, Kay Purcell, and I'm here with a very special guest today. This is my wonderful player slash co-star, Jenn Mack, who has been part of. She was actually the first streamed thing I ever did was with her. She was a player in my first streamed game, and then she was my player in Godplane. Hey, Todd! And yes, now she is with us in Todd Moonbounce's channels, The Dead Planet, for the Mothership. Jenn, tell us about yourself. People know who I am.
Oh, goodness. Hello. I'm Jenn. I'm Youngles on Twitch-ish places and on Instagram. And then I'm Jenn, the geeky writer everywhere else. That started because I actually started my gaming space part of my journey, I guess, in as at writing for geekmom.com. Words are hard right now. I'm sorry. It's been a day.
It's been a year.
It's been a year. It's been like a very
It's only March. Yes, and your point.
Yeah, exactly. I feel that. But yeah, so I do those things. I'm also a talent manager. That's kind of, my background or my day job. And I also just do partnerships for a couple places too. So kind of in all these different things.
Mover and a shaker.
Yeah, I try.
So welcome. Thank you for popping in on this International Women's Day.
Yes.
We wanted to talk a little bit about been a whole panna cotta. We want to talk just a little bit about we are both women, or at least women-leaning people in the TTRPG space, and I've found it's the more I've talked to men in the space, the more they don't realize a lot of the times that our experiences are fundamentally different. And especially as, some of us, I have the extreme privilege of being a white woman in the space. With, one foot in the LGBTQ space. But it's a very different, even more radical experience where intersectionalities, that's the second time I've done this. Whew, I mean, intersexual is also a thing.
Too.
Yes, the trans experience in TTRPG is a thing, being gay in TTRPG is a thing. Yes. So we wanted to touch on some of that today. It's a little bit of heavy, but people really like our spicy episodes, it seems. So.
I'm down for spicy. I mean, if you know what kind of work I do for a living, you know I'm all down for the spicy. There's nothing you can say that will make me blush, probably to a fault. So.
I don't know.
I mean, David tries, but
that's true.
He fails.
I can make you squee. I can make you uncomfortable in a game.
No, yeah. That's for sure.
So,
that's true.
Chat, thank you for hanging out. David, I see you there. Todd, we see you there. Thank you so much. I come up with some things that'll make y'all blush.
You should see my Google search history. That's all I'm saying.
And for those who don't know, I used to do full-time moderation for DeviantArt. So, yeah, between the two of us, we've got some world experience.
Yes.
But, so, one of the first things I want to talk about is, I'm actually, I feel like I've come in and made a bit of a splash, but I'm actually fairly new to the TTRPG space, personally, myself. And I start talking to people about this, especially dudes, and they're like, well, why didn't you get into it sooner? And I'm like, well, I didn't have an opportunity. And 9 times out of 10, and I'm pointing fingers at no one in particular because I completely understand how, from a certain worldview, this makes perfect sense. They're like, well, why didn't you just go to your local tabletop gaming store and just find a group? They're always looking for players. Yeah, that loaded sigh.
So I play Magic the Gathering. I played Magic the Gathering for a very long time. I actually played Magic the Gathering before I played TTRPG. So I used to go to
You need to run a Ravnica game for me then.
I would love to. Oh my gosh. Okay, don't get me an idea generating mode
I'm
right now.
I'm
Let's not.
in one Ravnica game, and Stephanie, who was on for an earlier episode, is my DM, and she made the mistake of letting me play. I created an original race, and I'm playing a plant genasi grave domain cleric in Ravnica. They're very
Oh,
Kai-like.
that
They were the original Kai, actually. Well, the
that
original
makes.
Kai was from DeviantArt days, but they also speak like this.
Oh
But
my
they
gosh,
require your
respect.
blood because they bleed sap.
Oh, I
Sorry,
like it.
continue.
Um, Wait, what is he saying? Kay is an extraordinarily personality as a DM player, and most importantly, as an expert for sure. Jen is a Stop it. Aw, thank you.
Jenn is super talented, very sharp, and I am super duper excited to see all the things that you're gonna do.
Thank you for finishing reading that. Thank
I
you for
had to. I
finish.
had. David would not forgive me
I know he
if I
wouldn't.
did not. I would
Okay.
never hear the end of it.
So, Friday Night Magic, I went a handful of times with my partner and too easy. My partner.
This is terrorism.
You know, compliments are like the thing I can't do. It's not. It's like the one thing. It means I hang out with y'all too much, is what that says. Um, but so Friday Night Magic, local comic shop. Number one, can we talk about how dark they are? Number one, like where are the lights? Like I don't know, like why is it like I know it's not the like I don't know why lights, and then why is everything the aisles so close, everything's so close to each other. So like anytime I walk into a comic shop and I am in any remotely way in a better looking shape than this right now, I have no breathing room because either stuff is in front of me or a person is breathing down my neck. So
The butt radar where you're like, I can't get my butt out of the way enough.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So every comic shop I've been to, every Friday Night Magic place I've been to has been the same exact space, except for one shop that was super open and everything was really lit up and it was really nice.
I
But
miss you, Meltdown
there,
Comics.
but there, I would run into issues where I like to use pink sleeves on my cards, and so when I would beat men, which was mostly what they were, I had a few comments of like, "I can't believe I just got beat by pink sleeves," and I'd be like, "What?"
Yeah.
And when I first started playing, there were people that would try to change the rules on me or like not use the card the way they were supposed to because they assumed I didn't know or something like that. So that's why we don't go to our local TTRPG comic shop thing.
So I had the great, distinct honor and joy of growing up in the South. And the satanic panic was real there. And the comic book shops did not carry tabletop games because they were actually separate stores, and there was exactly one tabletop store in Denton, Texas, and it looked terrifying. And not only did it look terrifying, they had like the cardboard cutout huge printouts of like characters in the windows, and like, but they were all the girls who were long-legged, scantily clad, right? So on top of having magic everywhere, which in the South, right? Like it was a really scary, shady place to go. And if you went there, I went to a Christian school. If anyone saw you going in or out of there, you were going to get called into the principal's office and given us talking to because you're doing something satanic. And then even if you went in there, it was an immediate questioning of why are you here? Who are you really buying for? Do you really like it was never a welcoming experience. And even if it was, it tended to get real creepy real fast. Oh, we got a
Understatement.
girl. Oh, you're going to play a girl character, right? What's she wearing?
And we see this across a lot of forms of nerddom. So like a lot of us, if you only have space to deal with it in that one nerddom space that you're in, like I'm a huge gamer, so I was already dealing with that in video games. I wasn't gonna add to that.
Yeah. And
with
I lived way out in the country. I had to be driven into town. So telling My very proper Southern mother, who was already having a hard enough time with my liking video games and comic books, to please take me to a tabletop store, it wasn't going to happen. Um, Now, all that, I feel like most guys are at least a little aware of it, right? There is an understanding, but like, again, even when you end up a lot of times in these spaces, um, things come at you in unexpected ways. And you have to be hyper vigilant and you have to be like raising your. So I've explained to people, and I've done this with every game I've ever interviewed to be on. Anytime we've sat down and been like, hey, I don't know this group. Are we going to join it for the stream? One of the things I ask is like, how do you feel about people playing a character who is a gender other than what you present as? Not I have played guys, and I do enjoy playing guy characters, but it's less that I want the freedom to play a guy character. You've met me, Jen. I'm happy to play a Phil. I'll play whatever fits the party. But if I'm told you look like a woman, so therefore you have to play a girl, things tend to get creepy at those tables.
Yeah.
And I'm not.
Or
Oh, go.
no, you go ahead. No, no, no.
I'm going to tell a story that's not mine, but was told to me when I asked this question
Okay.
in one of these interviews. And the DM, who was a guy,
Mhm.
and if you're in the chat, let me know if you want me to, because you handled this story very well. Like, the story was great, did it great. This is not shame, this is praise. But also, don't out people. They're not. But, like, this DM was telling me that there was a game that they were part of that they were pulling it together and it fell apart and it never aired. And you'll figure out why in just a second. But they were sitting there, and so they all agreed to play, and there was a woman playing, and she sent in her character sheet, and it was a guy, and they're like, no, you have to play a woman. And like, she was like, okay, like, I want to be part of the stream, so she changed her character. Um, and then she sent it back in, and she had a character who was magic based and had an int of, I think, 16 or 17. And the DM said, do you really think you can play a character like that? Not even 20. And it's like every red flag.
Like, what does that even mean? Like, sorry?
Every red flag went up for that campaign. um, so, and again, we said we were going to move into intersectionality. Look at my
Mhm. Mhm.
pronunciating correctly.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of that even comes before we start dealing with I am a woman and other people look at me with other stereotypes. So, Jen,
Mhm.
what stories do you have to
Oh,
share?
I have lots of stories. So a little bit, a little bit of background about me for those who don't know, because I don't necessarily present that way all the time. I was actually born in Korea. I'm half Korean. I grew up in Korea and America. So my Korean American experience is a little bit unique because there are lots of Korean Americans who have never been to Korea, like at all. They're not tied to Korea at all. There's nothing like that. So when people ask me where I'm from or like where I was born, sometimes I want to lie and say I was born here just so I don't reinforce that stereotype of like, oh, I was born in Korea. But anyway, so being an Asian American woman in any space is horrendous, mostly because there is a certain thing that happens, like there's being a white woman and then there's being an Asian woman, and they're not the same. Like how people will approach me will be very different if they code me as white or they code me as Asian, and that can change depending on the conversations I have with them. So if someone comes up to me and they assume that I'm white, they know that I'm something's a little not quite, there's things there but they can't put their finger on it. So I've gotten Turkish, I've gotten Mexican, I've gotten Latina, I've gotten a lot of different things. So they know something, but if they code me as white, they'll be like really nice to me. They might be a little bit like more treat me like I'm more fragile.
Mm.
But if they find out or they code me as Asian, I immediately become a sex object in a lot of cases. So that's just one degree of it. So a lot of times it's like, yes, it's intimidating to go into a comic shop or a TTRPG art space as a white woman. It's even more intimidating when you're going in and you know that there are going to be people in there that only are fetishizing you because of your race. Um, and it's very different when they look at you as a white woman, because to some people, white women are not considered people to a lot of those horrible, like on that side. But even if the white woman is considered a person to them, the Asian woman is not. So a lot of times, even my white women friends are not as allied as I thought they were. Yeah, yeah.
David,
Yeah,
don't make me laugh when she's
yeah.
being like so
No,
heartfelt.
it's fine. He's right though, and anime did the thing, because, and it's very interesting because people will code men. I keep saying the word code, but people will look at anime men and assume that it's a representation of the white man, right?
Mm-hmm.
White men will say, "Oh, I see myself in that," but they'll look at the girl and they'll assume she's an Asian woman
Mm-hmm.
or an Asian girl, which is very interesting to me because I'm like, they're in the same space. But anyway, yeah,
David and I
anime.
have had deep dives about like which anime characters are black, which anime characters are
Yes,
coded black, even if and
yes.
when and we won't dive into live action Cowboy Bebop because there's
I
lots of
have
people
thoughts
have
and
lots of
feelings.
feels about that, but
I
like
have
Jet
feelings.
Black being black is
So good.
correct.
So good.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Fight me.
Absolutely. 110. Actually, that's funny you mentioned that, because when we watch, okay, so first of all, I'm going to go into it a little bit. John Cho as the starring role of something, thank freaking God. Can I please have more of that? Like,
No,
him
you can't. Netflix
specifically.
actually said you
I
cannot.
know. I was like, I don't even care. But I do have feelings about him being Spike. So, I mean, I get it. Um, Valentine, I loved, but that's because I saw her as a very much a rendition of my own personal story. But we were watching Cowboy Bebop, and my partner is a white cis man, kind of cis, not really kind of cis, and has grown up around more white people. So he, even though so many anime girls are literally, yeah, for sure.
Your
He,
your web captioner decided that you said that your significant other is handsome. Like it was like it's a handsome. It's just handsome. That's cool.
he's a white man. He grew up around a lot of white people. I grew up around a lot of people of color and overseas and stuff like that. So like, Jet Black is black. Like, I mean, so we're having this conversation, and I was like, no, that makes sense. And he was like, he was not black in the end. And I'm like, no, he was. And we went back and we like were like, oh yeah, no, technically no, but like he is. Like,
Yeah. I mean, his name is Jet Black. Does what it says on the tin,
yeah,
as David
yeah,
would say.
exactly. So, but what were we talking about before that?
Uh, intersectionality
Right.
of being um, Asian and how you are perceived by people as not just a woman, but an Asian woman in the
Right,
space.
right, right. So I went from living between in Korea and America, where I wasn't accepted in Korea as a mixed person, um, and then moving to a very small town in England where I was the only person of color. So like, people made fun of my lips, people made fun of my eyes, even though they're not. I don't understand. I don't get it. But but what I'm saying is like, things would change, right? And so I grew up being this like the only POC around me that people felt comfortable enough saying things to, because I was also white looking. So when I go to a table or I enter a new space or go into a new group, I have so many anxiety inducing thoughts in my head, like, is this person going to, is this person going to do this, is this person going to do that? And at some point, um you just run into so many people that are like, hey, your whole existence in the world is to please men, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's it. And that's all we've been taught, which is so funny to me, because Korean women will beat you. Like, we will crush you. Like, you guys all watch K-dramas and stuff, I know it. Like, we do not mess around. So like, I don't even understand.
Just I absolutely do not want to make light of a horrible thing you have recently been through, and I also don't want to like but you tweeted about it, and I was like, remind me never to mess with her or her family.
No, we can talk about it. I don't care. I like so. One of the things that we've recently figured out is that the justice system does not care about us. So we as Asian women hired a lawyer to defend ourselves against a woman who was laying claim to my father's life insurance money, even though they weren't married. There was no legal ties. She a lot of stuff happened. This has been going on for 2 years, and she literally used her white tears the entire time to get people to sympathize with her situation in order to do what she did. And it was very apparent when we had to go to small claims court for our father's memorial flag, that it was a phone conversation. Nobody could see anybody. And she brought up we were from Korea a few times. So, like, it's just like that type of, like, I don't even have words for it. So, like, this has been my life, and on other sides too, because let me tell you, monoracial people in general do not know what it's like to be mixed, and they have a very big misunderstanding of how we fit into both cultures. So this isn't just coming from white people, this is also coming from a lot of cases from monoracial Asian people.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that type of upbringing, kind of having to be cautious, like, you asked me, the only reason I said yes was because it was you, because I knew you, because I knew you would be safe, and I knew that you would keep me safe, and you wouldn't allow me to be playing with people that would do otherwise. So when you recommended mothership to me, or when you said hey, and I was like, hey, is this okay, and you were like, yeah, totally, I knew that you wouldn't put me in an unsafe situation. I have been in so many situations where white people, out of ignorance completely, have brought me into unsafe situations without even thinking about it, because that person wasn't like that with them, or that person, they've never heard of that person doing it
Right.
before. And then when I
And you have
bring
to be
up, like,
so aware of it. Like,
ugh,
because sometimes it's really obvious, but like like you're not just aware enough to pick up, right? Like, it's
right,
been said all this time, but you never perceived it
right,
as a problem because this is how you're white, so everyone around you has always spoken this way.
right,
Um, but sometimes too, like some people, like this is why like really high level abusers work for a very long time. Like we both work in gaming. We've seen people very high level abusing people, women, people of color, people of other minority, like
and
because they
people that are your
hide it
same people.
really well. Mhm.
Yeah, like your same people. Like, I've honestly, being in the spaces that I am, I've seen more women put other women and women of color down in order to elevate themselves up in the space. Like, and it's amazing to me how people do things like that.
And I have to say that was one of the things I was so proud about pulling together because we pulled together God Paint pretty quickly. Like really all things considered. And we had Cassandra and um D'Angelo, who are both, Latinx. So it was like me and Sophie, and we both are like, at the time, I wasn't fully into the she they pronouns, but I knew I was like having that. I'm Ace, Sophie, I'm not gonna, but Sophie and I had discussions, and I'm like, I don't, if I ever run a game that it's just white faces, especially if it's just white dude faces, I've definitely failed the space because I'm not I'm trying really hard to tell stories and diverse stories, and not all of those stories are mine to tell, but I can hopefully set up a framework that is safe enough for people to come in and tell their stories and
Yeah.
enlighten me and enlighten everyone who watches. Because if we only watch stories told by white people, all we're going to get are white stories. And let's be honest, we've been telling white stories too long. We wrote the history books. Like, there's so many other amazing things to learn.
Yeah. Absolutely. What is he saying? The one thing everyone misses about the crabs in a bucket analogy is that a crab's natural habitat is in a bucket. Exactly. Exactly. And it's it's even more, it's very, very disheartening when you go to a space thinking that your friend has your back,
Mm.
and then you explain the situation to them, and because it hasn't happened to them, or they haven't seen it, or they don't fully understand or process it, it didn't happen. They don't.
Are you sure you're not overreacting? Are you sure that was their intention? Are you sure you're not reading into it?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And when
Like,
you're in Asian woman, because of things like anime, because of the obsession with Japanese culture, because of this kind of like white woman e-girls that wear Asian schoolgirl outfits or like do their eyeliner, it becomes very much like I become more white passing every day. So it's very so do you think you have this infighting with POC, but my experience, but that's often because of so much outside pressures?
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
it is absolutely a strategy by
Yeah,
groups to like turn different minority groups against each other, or to just straight up be like, we are helping this group, why doesn't this group then turn around and help this group? Like, they're that
right.
causing that infighting is a strategy to be like, oh no, we're the white saviors, we're doing this, they're just not doing their part, they're just, look at all these, oh my goodness, they said Black Lives Matter, and we did all we could to help black people, but now they're complaining about Asian. What I oh who do we who it can't be both of these.
And they will purposely put Asian people and black people against each other, preying on their insecurities. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, and me and David have had lots of discussions about this, mostly in here too, actually. But a lot of people don't know, but the government knows that Korea was occupied by Japan for a very long time. So a lot of old school Korean people will take that experience, that generational traumatic experience, and say that our people were slaves too. And I'm like, no, not the same thing. Back up the horse. Like, let's have a conversation. Let's slow it down. Let's think about this for a second. But because Korea has a big history of like protesting, and there's this big day that like we protested the Japanese rule and they stopped doing a couple things. Like, they've preyed upon that history to kind of separate all of us. And so a lot of times we don't know how to support each other without being like, what are you doing for me? Because we haven't seen that example. We've only seen fighting,
Mm-hmm.
and we've only been promoted to fight. And so it's just, there's a lot of nuance that happens when you're a POC in interacting with other POCs, because even as a Korean, I am like a model minority in the Asian community, right? Because Korean people right now have like a position of power over a lot of Asian groups. And so we saw like Rhea, that was supposed to be a Southeast Asian story, or in Southeast Asian story, I believe, that was all voiced by East Asian people, and white people had no idea why.
Mm-hmm.
We were all like, that's wrong, like there's something
Yeah.
wrong there. So there's all of these little things that we pay attention to every single day because it affects how we exist. And then
Right.
we come to a table full of white people, and
Or like,
none of that
yeah, white people are
experience is
like, we
there.
did the thing. We made a
Right,
story about people who look like you.
right,
So,
right. Exactly.
and that's
Or,
a problem.
they listen to Kevin with the East Asian Studies degree over the person who's actually lived in Asia or has that experience. So there's a lot of like nuance that white people just don't know. And so when we say, hey, I'm uncomfortable, if you have a person in your group that is any intersectionality, any POC, any type of marginalized identity, and they come to you and say they are uncomfortable, effing believe them, because regardless of whether you think it's true or not, they are uncomfortable.
And it takes a lot to have that conversation, too, because I
Right.
am a strong woman and I know how to survive in these spaces. And if I've gotten to a point where I'm like, there is a problem and I'm uncomfortable enough that I can't just wait for this to explode, because I can wait out most problem people.
Yeah.
If I can't wait it out, if I can't mind my P's and Q's until this person does, I can predict, this person's going to either just get bored, or they're going to like get so mad they're going to explode and like
Right.
dig their own grave, or they're going to climb to a point where they
Right.
make it impossible for me to do what I need to do. If if I can't wait out those two, or if I see that person climbing, that's when I have to turn to someone else, and I'm probably not going to do that until I'm like, there's a real problem.
Right.
And you were talking about, turning a lot of people of color against each other. Women have been trained
Oh my god, the
forever to
worst.
see other women as competition. I have gone into settings where they're like, hey, this is so and so. She's a girl. She's playing a girl too. Like, and they've expected me to come in ready to fight over which guy in the group am I going to date.
Right. And there's a lot of like Now to back up the train, I don't want to like dismiss what Korean people have done to other people of color because it's very valid. Like they did really horrible shit to people, like in a lot of different ways in a lot of different situations. And I don't want to dismiss the fact that like they made those choices themselves. But what I'm saying is like it's it's um it's really hard to have these conversations, and a lot of, just like POC, haven't seen people support each other across the aisle, so we're trying to figure out how to do it. We're navigating it all and it's really hard. Women have got this similar experience, not the same but similar experience of like not knowing how to navigate that. So I've
Mm-hmm.
gotten to a lot of spaces where I'm really, you know me, like do the thing, promote your, like I want to celebrate everything you're doing. If I have money, I'm going to jump in your chat and I'm going to freaking gift a bunch of subs and I'm going to like, you know,
She
get
does.
start hype trains. I'm not kidding. I will do it. I will do it. I love on your people. But I'm all about supporting women. I had to learn how to do that,
Mm-hmm.
especially as an Asian woman when I was surrounded by white women that didn't believe anything I said. I had to learn how to be like, you know what? I'm gonna learn how to support, and a gamer and everything. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're always meant to feel like we're the only one, that we're like the one girl,
We're the
and it's
one
always
cool
one.
one. If you turn again,
We're
like
not the girls.
I spent so much of my life being one of the guys just to survive and dealing with like
Same.
at I we had company parties that would go to strip clubs.
Oh, I never had to deal with
And
that.
yeah,
That sucks.
I'd be there because I was one of the guys. I was one of the cool ones. I was, and it was also like I want to be very clear. Um some of it was like yes, just the popularity, but some of it also was just straight up survival because
Oh, for
I
sure.
needed men in my circles to know that if I said I'm uncomfortable, they've seen me go through all like I'm not just going, oh so and so's just flirting with her, it's fine. Like I could handle whatever they threw at me, and if I came to them for help, they had to know that it was something more. Like that was straight up survival. And it is something you have to unlearn, and it is something that a lot of people don't want you to unlearn because it makes you a
Mm-hmm.
lot easier to control in spaces.
Oh, for sure. And the thing is like it makes you rely on them. Like you're relying on their protection. You're
Mm-hmm.
relying on, I can either be one of the guys or I'm out there and the girls are going to yell at me either way, so it doesn't matter. And then being one of the guys pins you, like I used to do Halo LAN parties in my friend's basement, and like I would be the only girl that wasn't invited to like the fancy cocktail party because that, like, I wasn't that type of girl or whatever. And like so there are all these little things that add up, and then when you start to like go to a new table with like new people, or you start a new hobby, or you're trying to get into a thing, even though it makes sense for you to be in TTRPG spaces. Like you love telling stories, you're really good at it, and so it makes sense for you to be there, but like you're like, why am I going to subject myself to that to try to have fun? Like it doesn't make sense. Like,
Yeah.
you know, so if it wasn't for women like you, or people like you, sorry, women like Satine Phoenix, like I interviewed Satine Phoenix, that was like a huge TTRPG goal of mine, and like um when I met her, the first one of the first things she said to me was like, oh, mixed representation, nice. And I was like, yes. Like she she we didn't even have to speak about it, it was just
Mm-hmm.
an understood thing. And she recently got hate on her Twitter because she said, hey, I'm gonna talk, I might start talking about my experiences, I feel I have stories to tell. And this dude was all like, you're a horrible role model for children, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, bro, calm it down. Like,
If you think that's a horrible representation for children, imagine what you've put other women through.
this woman had to do a game in 30 minutes with no prep, and saw Groundhog Day playing on the TV in whatever lobby she was at. So she did that. She's like, you walk into a tavern. After so many minutes, the tavern blows up. They all die. And now you walk into the tavern again. What are you going to do? And so they had to, all off the top of her head within 30 minutes. The woman is a
Amazing.
genius. Like, so it's because of representation like that that
Mm-hmm.
keeps me going, because without y'all, I honestly, it would have.
And I want to dive into again going back to the intersectionality. Um I am both a lady type and not exceptionally good at math. And I throw out that joke very quickly because I know at the certain tables, that's the first, oh, of course, the girl can't do math, right? I can't even imagine the weight that comes with that with the model minority attached to it.
So my background is forensic chemistry for college. I took calculus 4 in math, so I'm very good at math and computers and tech and things. And I hate it. I hate it. Absolutely hate it. Sorry, you're tricky.
It's
Because
great.
people will assume I'm good at math, and I want to say no, but I love numbers so much, which is why I'm into. Like, I use the Pythagorean theorem to figure out if one of our players could reach a bat, and I was like, and the DM was like, I don't know, and I was like, how high is the bat? And he's like, 20 feet high. And I'm like, how far away is the player? And he's like, 30 feet. And I was like, give me a second. And I like was doing the math. And then I was like, the player is 7 feet tall. If he reaches out 2 inches, the bat's tail is 2 inches away from this player's head. He can, in fact, reach the bat with that misty step. And but because I'm an Asian American, I hate it. I want to say no. I don't want to. Like, my mom sells Korean cars. My sisters have worked at dry cleaners. Like, and I'm not like it's really it honestly sucks because there are things about us like that aren't necessarily stereotypes. They are they're just true, like my existence, right?
Right.
And so anytime you're a person of color, anything you say becomes representative of the entire group, just like being a woman. So when you're an Asian woman, me being the gamer, multicolored hair, manic pixie dream, whatever the hell, like, reinforces all those stereotypes in a way that like makes you question your identity even more, because you're like, am I helping? Am I hurting? Should I change who I am? But like, how does that, because there are tons of people that are not like me at all.
Right. Yeah. And again, nowhere near the same, but like play systems without math.
Or you can call me. I'll do your math for you. It's fine.
Again, nowhere near the same, but like I really enjoy baking. I love making delicious desserts. I'm good at it. I will find a good recipe and make it better. I will infuse it with alcohol. I love baking. And I usually make too much, so I always end up taking baked goods into the office. And sorry, Manhattan's very loud today. Um, I brought a batch of cookies into the office at one time and had them sitting out, and I was in the kitchen getting something when someone else came in and was like, "Oh my goodness, did you make these?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And let me just back up and say that this person said this thing with nothing but kindness in their heart. They said this as one of the highest compliments they could think of. But they looked at me and said, "You are going to make a great wife and mother someday."
That it, ain't it? Yep.
My value, regardless of my ability to bake, has nothing to do with who I sleep with or who I spawn. And a demon came out of my throat and said, "Fuck everything about that." And he was floored. Because and like part of me, a little piece in the back of my brain is like, he's being really nice. But again, like that concept of my understanding of women is this, and you did a thing that fits in that box, and therefore the
Yeah.
highest compliment I can give you is this thing that I desire out of women in my life, which is nowhere near what I desire for my life.
Right. Right. And can we just talk about the Korean Olympics for a second? Because I was working in person during that, and that was horrendous. I have never, nobody cares about my, unless like Psy does something, Ollie London is doing something, or something is happening in Korea. And then all the Olympic people that were there that were from the Western countries were like rescuing dogs. And so I was answering questions about that stereotype. And I was like, well, when you're poor and your entire country is being split in two by powers that have nothing to do with you and they bomb everything, I mean, your choices are kind of limited then. Not to mention the whole reason Korean street food is there is because Korean women kind of created it to make money off of soldiers so that they could function, right? So there are all these stereotypes that build and build and build and build, and then you show up with your harmless little baked goods, or you just go into work for the day and people are like meh, 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 meh. And now your whole day is ruined in some cases. But yeah. And then there's the neurodivergent intersectionality, and then there's the queer intersectionality, and like, so that's just like one aspect, and then yeah, it's just.
So yeah, what is, so again, I can sit here and complain all day about all sorts of BS because, you know, we're humans. We're all real good at that. But like, I have to say, one of, I have definitely seen over the past couple years like a whole lot more women and a whole lot more people of color coming to uh I don't want to say fame, but like relative fame in the space. You know, we had the Summer of Abria. Gabe got to DM for Dimension 20. We saw Robbie and Amy on Critical Role. B. Dave Walters is on like DMing freaking actual TV. Like there's a D&D show on TV with a black DM. Like we've seen
Critical
Bard, we've seen DJ Knight, we've seen Cypher of Tyr, we've got freaking that bronze girl DMing
I love her. You have me addicted
I love
to
her.
her short.
I made her a dice and she uses it for Shakar and I'm gonna cry. Um so you know, we've seen this explosion and yes, there's always I hate saying there's always going to be BS. I hate saying there's always going to be jerks because that, to a certain extent, is defeatist. But also, I feel like there's a certain level that we just have to like acknowledge that, like, I'm going to talk about a good thing, but also there's still bad things because, like, I don't want to get bogged down in the details. But yeah, there's always. But this has been a space that's actually really, really supportive of women.
Yes.
There's some interesting like people coming up and butting heads about like, oh, your cosplay shows too much cleavage. Why are you showing cleavage in a dice game?
There's, and I think part of that, and maybe what you're trying to kind of like allude to, and the way I kind of look at it, because if you think there's going to be an end, you just get excited for an end, and just it's not. There's always going to be people that are ignorant of your experience, always, and so ignorant people just don't know a lot of times. So, and I'm not saying like, yes, there's the hateful, the spiteful, but there's always going to be ignorant people. So to that point, Mothership, when we first got together and there's that conversation about what things would look like without a patriarchy, that and then we were trying to have and we were all kind of what, and then it's not that anybody was trying to say anything bad or do anything bad. It's just that none of us would know what that would look like in that experience, and I don't think that other people in that space like really thought about it until we started explaining why.
Well, it's one of those easy things like late stage capitalism is not working. Cool, what's the better system than late stage capitalism? Well, we know a lot of things that don't work, right? It's one of those things that seems like, oh, we can just fix it, and then it's not. But
it's so deeply ingrained. Like even look at how there's weird things happening, like so the language of like waifu and husbando and things like that. Like, is that appropriative? Is it not appropriative? In what conditions? You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that anybody like, I don't care, but like, is that even my am I even allowed to care because I don't look, you know? So there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And I even like this is one of those things like people in video games because like, okay, look, like if we're gonna jump, I'm gonna jump to video games real quick and be like, E3 banned booth babes a long time ago, and I'm like, great, we don't need booth babes, right? No problem. If you are an awesome lady with an amazing body and You make your living modeling and hoisting. Awesome, good for you.
Yeah.
No problem, no shame. But like E3 is supposed to be a consumer show, and
Right.
I certainly don't feel comfortable when I walk up to a booth to try and do an interview, and all I see are women who I will never look like.
Right.
That's just clearly a space that's not for me. That's
Right.
just all that tells me. No tea, no shade to anyone. But like, it's really interesting the people who get really mad in the TTRPG space about like these women are cosplaying or like they're wearing dresses that show too much cleavage, and it's clearly sexy pretty. And I'm like, have you opened a D&D book? Have you looked at any of the art for Magic, for D&D, like the official stuff that Wizards puts out? It's a lot worse than what women are doing on these streams.
And it's so interesting when it's an Amaranth. I love Amaranth. I'm sorry, but like I don't. I love a woman who like she's a very smart businesswoman. Amaranth has come out and said it that they only seem to care when we're doing it for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So when it's being done by men
Mm-hmm.
for video games, TTRPGs, art, whatever it is, it's
If
fine.
you pay a
Anime,
woman to wear a
it's
skimpy
fine.
outfit and stand at a booth,
It's fine.
no problem.
But if she chooses to take on the power herself, all of a sudden it becomes a problem. She owns a gas station. Did you know that? I was
did
like, go
not.
her. Yeah, she owns a gas station. She's got billboards. This woman, like, yeah, get that bag for sure.
That's
But
what.
it
Real quick, Todd said, my time at TTRPGs has really opened my eyes to it, thankfully, but it's still really hard to go against muscle memory. And yeah, that's exactly, like, and I will say this very openly. Like, I am moving into she, they pronouns. I have spent many years wishing I didn't look like a woman. If I could be completely androgynous, that's what I would be. I can't. I got hips for days, and I deal with doctors enough without making not making those go away anytime soon. Um, even as I've been a woman my entire life. I have fought the patriarchy. I have fallen into it. I have, yes, channeling my inner Bowie every chance I get. Um, I have a lot, like, I still spend a lot of time unpacking internalized misogyny. There are things that I reach for, and I will say something, and I'm like, why is that my immediate go to? Why do I think that way? Why do I feel that way? Um, and so
right.
it's, even if you are of that, like, and I don't know, I can't speak for you, Jen, but like you had said, there were things where you're like, I'm really good at math, I really like anime. Is that leading into a stereotype as an
Right.
Asian? Is that good or bad, or just me? Like, I can't imagine grappling with that as well.
So there's this very big misconception that white people have of what it's like to be a POC, and I obviously can only speak from my personal experience. I can't speak for anybody else, but we as POC in general also have to grapple with whiteness and also have to grapple with the standard, right? So while white people, yes, have a lot of inner work to do, there are a lot of people of color out there that also have inner work to do because we have also been subject to the same system as the rest of you. So when a lot of times when we look at like that one Asian person or that one, in my case, when I see Korean people being like anti-black or being, very misogynistic or being whatever, like I know that they haven't done that inner work themselves. Like we all have inner
Right.
work to do at every level. And so it's very hard to kind of, when you're dealing with it as a woman against the patriarchy, now I'm also dealing with that, and then I'm
Mm-hmm.
also dealing with the whiteness factor, which is then you're also dealing with beauty standard, because as a Asian person, there's a lot of like, I'm gonna have mixed kids. I want my kids to look like you. I'm purposely, especially right now with K-pop, there's a
Mm.
lot of purposely seeking Korean men for an aesthetic, and it's very obvious to all of us. And then on the other side, you have a lot of white people moving to places like Korea to teach English and then getting mad because they're treated like foreigners. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, sir. You're a foreigner. And then they act like there's this whole discourse on Twitter right now, or TikTok. Anyway, but then there's all like this, like, oh, expats discrimination. You moved there on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
You paid the money, and you chose to go there. No
You
one
maybe
forced
didn't
you.
research enough, but yeah, that's what you did.
I'm sorry you didn't find your oppa while you were there. I apologize, because that's not really how it works. But But my point is like, you're not stuck there
Mm-hmm.
unless you choose to be. That is not someone taking away your privilege or someone taking away your rights. That's you purposely going there and choosing to do that. Or choosing to, or a lot of them use it as like a tourist year or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of misconception about what Korea is in general. On top of now, I mean, we're super popular. That doesn't necessarily make it better. So there's that, and then there's the beauty standard, and then there's the white people getting lip injections and stuff like that. And now people think I'm white and are asking me to show my DNA somehow to prove that I'm Asian and so. So there's that woman. There's that, and then I'm also a parent, and then I'm also like basically white kids, right? So then I'm also trying to not pass on stuff, and then there's the neurodivergent aspect where sometimes I'm like, is this because I'm Asian and American and like live in this weird bubble, or is this because I'm neurodivergent? Like, and so yeah, there's more.
Yeah. So like, I'm gonna do a slight tangent here. Um,
Tangent way.
so okay. Um, I hate to. Okay, we're going spicy. I'm bringing up a thing that everyone loves, and I love it too. But like, getting to a point. I love Breath of the Wild. I love Breath of the Wild. Love Breath of the Wild. But there is a city in the game that is all women, only women. So what is one of the goals of the game? You dress in drag, and Link inserts himself into the all women city, and it's fine and dandy. And look, this is definitely not like as bad as it could have been, but it still bothers me to my core that I have to do this to complete the game. It, yeah, I hate it. They're just, they cannot have women only spaces. It's just not doable. Um, we see kind of, there really aren't any women only spaces in D&D outside of like hags.
Mm.
Like chat, I could be wrong. I could know more, but like I know they're hags usually. And David and I at some point are going to do a deep dive into this, because for people of color, there's a whole lot of unpacking and fixing that's being done slowly, step by step. Progress is being made. It's not done
I
yet.
call it the Ari Salvatore effect. And don't get me wrong, I love, you know how much I love. I am such a Dress fangirl. It's not even funny. However, because of those books and that book series, so many people think that opposite patriarchy is Menzo Berenzen. And there's so many stereotypes on women and in that whole thing. Not just women, but like dark-skinned women, like in that whole thing. Which, by the way, Daughter of the Drow is very, very good. Anyway, it's a whole series about a girl who's a drow and like goes to the surface, and there's more surface drow, and it's a little bit like less like all the women.
Yeah,
like
I know he's also got a whole new clan of drow that like are not underground.
Yeah, so so Daughter of the Drow kind of goes through a little bit more about that and talks more about Alistry, because my character that I play off stream, Erin, is a lot of my characters are half something because it's very much my thing. So obviously, so she's a half drow because drow are typically seen as like non-favorable amongst the land. So of course I have to be a brat and be a problem in my existence because I wouldn't be me. And so she was dropped off with a high elf. What elf is that? What elf? Probably, I think. I can't remember. But she carries a short. What does she carry with her? A short crossbow. No, she carries a short bow. I'm getting my characters mixed up. She carries a short bow, but she doesn't carry any arrows. And the reason she doesn't carry any arrows is just because she worships the goddess Elistri. And Elistri is the daughter of Loth, who was tricked into killing her own father, if I'm remembering this correctly, with an arrow because Loth convinced her that it was somebody else. And so out of worship of this goddess, she carries the bow as like a sacred like symbol that she trusted somebody she shouldn't have trusted, and so it's how she, you know, keeps her wits about her, and so she has this bow. And so my other players are consistently trying to give me arrows to use with it, and I'm like, she doesn't use arrows. That's the whole point of her existence. And her dex is like a 9. You don't want her using arrows anyway. It's not good.
Won't end well.
No, but that's how my experience influences the characters that I create, and that's the only reason I know about that series, because I was looking up different goddesses, and so that they talk a little bit more about her in the Daughter of the Drow series.
So yeah, like in D&D, there's a lot of racial coding in things that are being undone. So, you know, the orcs and the drow, and to an extent tieflings, like tieflings, I feel like several different races can kind of hang their hats on tieflings, but orcs and drow especially are very black coded. Someone told me Yuan-ti are Asian coded, which I'm not.
Probably.
I don't know that it's 100% because they're very.
Well, Asian means, like, I mean, you have East Asian, South Asian,
right.
Southeast Asian, PI,
Pacific Islander, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, have you, you know, at some point I'm gonna get David on to rant about coding of races, because it's a huge other Chinese leaning.
Like Chinese are like specifically, or like East Asian, because the the new magic thing, I'm so bad with Japanese words. What is it? Kamigawa, that's it.
Kamigawa.
It's like, it's very interesting to me because China, Korea, and Japan have such a shared history in a lot of ways, but like Japan obviously is like the white people of East Asia a little bit, but then the East Asians are kind of like the higher up than like everybody else in the racial hierarchy, because we have a closer proximity to whiteness and all this stuff. But like, I haven't looked too much into them, but I know that a lot of times monk characters are played very stereotypically Asian.
Yeah.
And people will write, like, you know, campaigns with very big Asian stereotypes in them, or full of Asian stereotypes. And for some reason, like, I think because of anime and things like that, it's very much okay in a lot of circles, and like, I don't understand that at all.
I definitely, I've seen a lot of games with a very strong anime influence.
Yes. It's interesting to me because anime was like their answer to Disney in a way, so it's very ironic that it's. Do you know what? Do you get what I'm saying? Because like they were like, oh, we want to make cartoons like that, and now people are like, oh, well, it's
so much cooler. David said, I can't wait to play a monk that's literally Raz from The Man with the Iron Fists.
Yeah, I love like kung fu movies, and like if someone could make like a campaign that's like a kung fu movie, I would be there. Like
Wu-Tang 5e
Wen. Like, I would be there. And I really like the Kamigawa series of the Magic because it's not just Asian coded people. There's Black people in it. There's all different types of shades of people that are in the set. And so that was really nice to see. But I do think that, like, because we as POC, I think one of the best ways I've ever heard it explained is that POC have a shared trauma of racism. Like, we have different experiences, but we have the shared trauma of racism.
I have to say, like, even Wizards is getting better about really just incorporating a lot of different looks and races into the art for books. And it's like there's still, again, you know, and I am by no means giving anyone a pass, like, anywhere. Like, look at this kid. He's amazing. Look at his hair.
So cute.
He's so great.
Yeah.
But like,
I love it.
B. Dave Walters has this whole thing about like, and he works a lot directly with Wizards, you know, and he's all like, they got a ways to go. They're not done. They've gotten. He's like I grade on a scale, right? Because things in the past, it's really difficult to say things in the past were just different, right? Because we didn't have the same awareness. We didn't have the same information. Society was just different.
And it's not that things were very much different, because people of color have always been kind of screaming about what we've. Well, Asians are very specific because they're kind of like, oh, we shouldn't even be here, like be thankful. Like seriously, my mom would like I was with her. I was my son was having a procedure done, and she came with me to the waiting room, and the lady in the waiting room was like, "Oh my god, your English is so good," and I was like, "I'm 36 years old. I'm sitting right next to her. Like, what do you mean?" And my mom was just like, "Oh, that's just like the price we pay to be here," because to her, you know, she came here when she was 20. She, you know, like this isn't her space. She lived, you know, she thought this would be a better life because 80s Korea was very different than it is now. So to her, that is the price we pay to be here. And we're all like,
Todd has a really great question in
okay,
chat. Todd says he wants to know, Jen, is there an appropriate way to honor other cultures through a character?
okay, this is tricky.
This is a complex one.
This is a complex one. Okay. I'm gonna have a similar answer, probably to what you guys talked about a little bit last time. Is it's like, because there is a lot. I gotta be careful. There is a lot of, hey, I'm just appreciating this culture. I'm just appreciating this character. I'm just appreciating, you know, whatever. I would say if you're doing a stream, then no, because that's not a safe space for you to learn, and you're going to subject other people to unconscious bias or ignorance, and then somebody, a person of color, is going to have to do the due diligence and the labor of correcting you. They're going to have to. They're not going to have a choice. That's putting them on the spot to like be like, no, that's not, that's a lot of work, and that's a lot of labor, and that's a lot to ask of somebody. You're muted for some reason. I can't hear you.
My headphones are being
Yes.
very grumpy today.
There.
Sorry, y'all. It's also if that person of color or the multiple people of color, if you're fortunate, you know, if you're doing your work, who should speak up, don't, if it's not the right situation, if they don't have the spoons that day, if it's not called out in that moment, um, that can become like they become a meat shield, right? Like, well, so and so did this, and they had two people of color on that stream, and neither of them said anything.
Exactly.
So it has to be okay, which is not the case, and that's why I tend to get really frustrated when people start talking. You know, something happens, a bad decision is made, and everyone's like, didn't they get a sensitivity reader? Well, probably, but no culture is a monolith. So maybe the sensitivity reader read it and their background, to them, it was fine because they have their own biases and their own life experiences.
Right.
But also, maybe the sensitivity reader said, this is not a good thing. I advise against it. And they said, well, we're going to do it anyway. Because
how many times has that happened? Probably a crap ton.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly.
Sensitivity readers are often brought in at the end after all the money and everything has been invested. So unless they say, I can guarantee you this is a bad thing, they're like, it's fine.
Right. And oftentimes, there's a lot of people that are people of color that are what we call, at least in from whatever, like self-hating, because we also, like I said, grew up in a proximity to whiteness. So a lot of us are brought up with a self-hatred of our own race or our own standing out or own existence, or the way we exist, right? So that adds another level too. So not every person of color is going to be as progressive or have the education or have done the work themselves in order to be able to see why something is a problem. For example, even as a Korean person who grew up in Korea, who like grew, you know, Korean church, the whole thing, I feel really uncomfortable if I wear a hanbok in public, which is like the traditional Korean dress, because I know as a Asian and as my white face, I will inadvertently give white people permission to do the same thing without the context. And I know a lot of my fellow Asian friends are like, that's stupid, you're full of shit. But you should just do it. But to me, I grew up as like the white person in the Asian family and the Asian person in the white country. So like I'm very aware of how my presence is used as a pass for other people to do or say shit.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're a white person and you're trying to embody a character that doesn't necessarily belong to you, which is really what that is, there's a lot of work and nuance to do. Because if you think about it, it's like cosplaying, for example. Black cosplayers, people of color cosplayers get a shit ton of hate because, you know, Hinata isn't black or whatever. And so the thing is like, okay, fine, but who are they supposed to cosplay as? And a lot of white people don't understand that when they cosplay as a black person, that's problematic because you have everybody else.
As much as I love Storm, and Storm is my goddess, I will never cosplay
Is
Storm.
there, like, if you, I don't even know. I can't speak for black people. I don't even know. But I can tell you, I get really effing pissed when I see white people cosplaying as characters and they make themselves look more Asian or
Yeah.
they make themselves look more, you know, whatever. But at the same time, like, I'm not saying white people shouldn't cosplay or play other characters out of their experience. I think that they should really think about how they're doing it and the emotional labor that they are asking of the people that they are with, that they're going to have to be with to do it in a good way.
In my younger years and in my excitement for one of my favorite X-Men um, being portrayed in the films in an outfit that I could wear, I saw concept art of this character whom I love. I knew her from the comics. She was pink. She was, if anything, like she was from the Bahamas, maybe like never drawn black, but could maybe have been black coded, but was never, portrayed as. And I saw her and I went, oh my god, I love her outfit. I love everything about that. And I just scrambled and I hand beaded 5,000 beads and made this costume out of concept art. I had the costume done before the movie came out and got all of it ready. And I was so excited to play this character. And then I realized, oh, she's Asian. Like in the movies, they changed her race and cast a Chinese woman to play her. And I was like, what do I do? And it was this moment of panic. And I certainly, like, I replicated the makeup and that I had like pink purple eyeshadow. And I was like, not doing any massive things. I'm not taping my eyes. Like, I was like, and I was so worried about Affinity that I think I wore it like twice. After all of that work, I think I wore it twice because I was like, this is not my space. And like I did run into several, Asian women while wearing it who were like, I love it. Like one of them was actually dressed as the same character and she's like, let me see how you did the beading. And like everyone was so great. But I'm also like, I also know that this is not my lane. I just messed up because I was so excited that I didn't notice a thing that I should have.
And X-Men, it's so hard too because like X-Men, for example, is a great example of that though, because you have like Jubilee, you have like what's her name?
Psylocke.
Yes.
Betsy Braddock.
Psylocke, which
That's
a whole other conversation. But you have all of these women that are women of color in the X-Men space, but there are not as many as white women in the X-Men space, which is probably why you felt a little, which is perfect. It means you're aware, you're understanding. And nobody's saying that you can't cosplay as that character as long as you're not, over exaggerating your eyeballs or like doing that stupid fox eye trend. I can't even. Anyway, I need to sip.
Someday I hope that you'll actually like share your feelings with us, Jen.
We have to do cameras at work now, and I'm like, you don't want this. I do not have a poker face. You will know exactly how.
That's what makes Mothership so much fun. But, as Todd, as I said a little bit in our last episode, David has given me the incredible opportunity of playing a character who is half orc, and it's very obvious that, the orc half is black coded. And David is teaching me a whole lot and putting in the emotional labor to not just tell an amazing story, but he's set up a world where, I am definitely I love this home game so much. There's 4 of us in the DM, so 5 of us. two of those folks are people of color, and of our party, three of us are non-human races, or at least half non-human races. And the world that we're in is like 90% human. Um, any kind of half race is an anomaly that really stands out.
Mm.
And
Which we
just the
are.
awareness and the understanding that David has given me, and
Yes.
he's really put in so much work, and I'm so grateful, and I have learned so much. It is, again, never will replace actual life experience. It's always going to be
Right.
a mask that I put on and get to take off at the end.
Right.
But it's taught me to be so much more aware and so much more empathetic and just made me a better ally. So thank you, David. I'm going to yell about that forever. And then David had some really great comments that I want to read off.
Yeah.
He said, I can't speak for women, but I can speak from my own experience. It's important to remember, and there's a slippery slope here, so I tread extremely lightly. But culture is evolving and merging in
Yes.
a lot of ways, some ways good and some more discordant.
Hmm.
But Wu Tang is a great example. There's a huge collision of blaxploitation films and kung fu films, and that gives
Yes.
birth to huge Asian influences in black communities, both Chinese, Japanese, like as a bunch of black dudes if ask a bunch of black dudes if Piccolo was black. Oh, I have
Oh, for
been part
sure.
of that conversation.
Yeah, me too. And David makes a really good point because there is a lot of fusion happening, and
Mhm.
so when and but that's I honestly think if that Asian community and the black community came together, it would be so powerful. It would the world would shatter. Because like kung fu movies is a big part of black history in
Mhm.
America. I mean, you ask, you know, and 80% of black people in the stats that I've read play video games, are nerds, are into anime, are doing the thing. It makes sense to have Afro Samurai and black, anime studios, and because we, as having a shared trauma of racism, have bonded together in this way, which I think is why there should be more of that. Like it's it's I think when it comes specifically to how Asian and black communities can work together, I think that kung fu and anime and geek stuff is a big part of that. And I love it when I see black people cosplay as whatever they want, you know what I mean? Because they should be able to. Um and I had a point and now it's going.
It happens.
It happens. But we do have to
Fusion.
tread lightly because there
Mhm.
is a lot of appropriation on both sides.
Right. And we are in a really interesting time where cultures are, like David said, moving and fusing. It was also really, really interesting because I have a lot. I love Welsh. I am not Welsh. my family, we thought we were Irish. Turns out we're Scottish. Good to know.
Welcome.
Um, Yay, DNA tests. And I love Norse. We've got a tiny bit of Norse, but we've got a lot of Scottish.
Same.
Um, and
Same.
I love Scottish, but what I love even more is I love Welsh. I love Welsh stories. I love the Welsh language. And a lot of almost all those weird god names are actually Welsh. They are words in Welsh,
Yeah.
maybe slightly altered. And I play, my weird plant genasi is Wyn Within, which is a beautiful, flowing, poetic Welsh word that literally means vine. And
Mm.
as I was putting this character, and one of my oldest characters who became Wyn eventually is a Denyeth, which is
Mhm.
wings. And
Mhm.
I love these words, and so I actually, through a whole series of events that involve podcasts and last minute guests, I ended up talking to a woman who's Welsh, who's amazing, and I'm like, can I ask you before I play this character, because getting the pronunciation, so WINWYDDTHIEN. So like it's this incredibly
You've
long,
already lost me.
yeah, it's these long where like double D's are said like TH, and I'm like, I
Yeah.
think I know how to say this, but also like I would really like to not mess this up, so can I ask you? And so she just started talking Welsh to me and dropping all this information and then telling me like, about the Welsh knot, which is terrifying. Like white people hate each other just as much as
Well,
we
you
hate
bring
other
up a
people.
really good point I want to talk about when you're done with your story.
Um, and so we started talking, and I was like, thank you for not being like upset, because this is, appropriation to an extent. And she's like, Welsh was a dead language. We are trying to like
Right.
put Welsh back into the world. So thank you for being interested in my people and my culture and carrying
Right.
it forward. And I'm like, that is not a reaction I ever expected
So
to get.
2 points to that. That's why Korean's so popular, because when the Japanese took over, they literally wouldn't let us speak our own language, and we had to adopt Japanese names and speak Japanese and be Japanese. Except they still hated us. It was weird.
I
But
mean, we
so
whites still hated the Welsh, so
well, yeah. So, but to your point, they that's also a whiteness problem. Is that like when I started researching my Scottish heritage, oh my gosh, like we're from the Highlands. And so I found out that they're the god and goddesses of Scotland and the Highlands specifically, and the gods and goddesses of Korean shamanism, they shared a lot of the same, like their Kailak in Scotland, and I'm totally butchering that pronunciation, who is like the giant that created the world. She carries stones in her pockets and like peas for mountains and lakes and rivers and stuff. So she'll like throw a stone and it'll be a mountain. Has the same characteristics as Mago, who is traditionally a Korean goddess who did the exact same thing.
I love those universal stories.
Yeah, and so like if you're as a white person, you want to get into a culture, figure out what your culture is because they took it away from you too on
Yeah,
purpose.
and that's what David and I have had conversations about. Like, I am white. Like, I know I've got Scottish in there somewhere, but like, I've had haggis like twice in my life. I don't know how to play bagpipes. I've never done
Right.
caber tossing, right? Like,
Oh, I
we
have.
lost, we gave up our
Yes.
history, we gave up
Yes.
our culture when we became white.
Right.
I have, you know, a little bit of German, and there was a long story in our family history that we were. So we knew through through Track of Daughters of Revolution that we're related to George Washington through his wife. We
Oh
knew
wow.
that, like that's part of my family. But there was also this weird story that we were related to like Abraham Lincoln, like, and there were these weird things.
That's
And so
so
then
strange.
after we did like the 23andMe, we went through and I was digging through and like trying to dig through the family tree and get information and figured out that the reason we had these stories of being related to all these presidents was this German family came over, started farming in America, had 8 children, named them George Washington, whatever the last name was, Abraham Lincoln, whatever the last name was, and just went
Oh
through all the founding fathers, all these presidents, and named them
my god.
first name, the last name is the middle name, and they were just like, we're American. This is here. This is what we're doing.
That's amazing.
So, um, we probably need to wrap up soon, but David has an amazing question for us to close it out on. Speaking of allyship in the TTRPG space, what can men do on an individual level to make the space more safe, and what sort of institutional shifts need to happen to make the space improve?
Representation. And one of my favorite things about Godplane, and one of the things I really that Kay and David, you guys did really well, was being like, okay, let's have a conversation. What are you okay with? What are you not okay with? Here's a sheet. These are all of the things that might happen in this campaign. Not like specifically, but they were like, here are the general topics of things that could happen. Are you okay with any of these? What is your comfort level? Is it green? Is it yellow? Is it a red? Like you're very specific to be like what, and let us know like consent was taken, and like we could just at any point be like not okay with that, and we would move on. And Todd and Rich's space is a little bit like that too. I mean, they didn't give us worksheets, but like whereas
Hey, Vivian.
there was a lot.
Yeah, and it really listening, and not just listening when women say things are wrong,
Right.
but like I try to be careful telling this story, but David was there. I was in it. David and I were in a campaign, and there was an individual playing who clearly didn't like me, and was passing it off as this is my character not liking her character. And to be fair, his character had great reason to not like my character. Um, but the pot shots were clearly being taken at me, and anyone with eyes could see it. And as we were talking about before, I'm a woman in the space. Um, I I took one look at this person and was like, he's going to blow himself up eventually. If I make a big deal out of it, they're going to say, oh, no, no, he's a friend. It's in character. Why are you taking it? So I waited and I gave him enough rope to hang himself. And he really didn't like that. He was clearly one of those people who was used to everyone doing what his character said because he's a little bit of a bully. And
Follow
I
the
would,
story.
yeah, my character would say, why don't we do this other thing? It's more logical. And everyone would be
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's the better idea. And ooh,
They don't like that.
and I never returned the insults. I would lean into, I was playing a character with 8 intelligence, and I'm like, well, I'm not smart enough to know that that's an insult to me, so, and I just wouldn't. Until he blew up and went on a huge sexist rant in the middle of a sponsored stream. I'm not going to use the words that he said in this show
Right.
because it was not okay, but it was belittling women. And as this is happening, I keep looking at my DM and looking at my DM and being like, David, this is happening, right? And David's like, yep, DM's going to stop it, I'm sure.
I will still fight this.
And DM never stopped it, and we continued with the game. And we finished the game. And I was fuming and shaking and just like I needed to walk away to be able to articulate how many layers of not okay that was, especially because the DM's underage daughter was also playing this game with us. Um so David was unable to not jump at this because I'm like I need time to like approach this logically. David, much more quickly than I, reached out to the DM and was like, I'm not okay with what happened. This person came after Kay. I'm not okay with it. And the DM said, oh, it'll be fine. I'm going to tell so and so to back off a little bit. But because David did that, he at least had the impetus to message me and say, I think I need to tell so and so to back off. And I'm like, oh, it is so beyond that. I'm like, number one, I will never play a game with this person again. Number two, you need to edit out that. These are all the reasons it's sexist. This is a sponsored stream. You need to apologize to the trauma you potentially put our viewers through. You need to apologize to the sponsor. And you have to decide, is it me or this person? Because I'm never gonna. And by the way, you just told your underage daughter that that behavior is okay.
Bingo. So that's what's not to do. Do you want to hear a story about what to do?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Let's take this the other way.
So I was in a Cursive Strahd. I was invited to a Cursive Strahd campaign from one of my very best friends, and I was.
Web captioner thinks it's a Christmas party campaign. So yes, you were invited to a Christmas party campaign. Santa's gotten interesting.
There's nothing Christmas about Barovia, let me tell you. So I was invited into this campaign. I hadn't played in a while. I was really excited to play. I wanted to start playing, and I only knew one person and her husband. That's all I knew. And there was like one other dude, and then the dude DM, and everything was fine. We had a lot of fun. Things were good. And then they added back in, apparently, because this is a campaign that they had been doing, and then like I jumped in. So they added back in this other dude. That was when it all went wrong. And this other dude, that one instance, he was standing, his character, who was a woman cleric, of course, who never did anything, standing at her horse, barking orders at Aaron, who's not taking any of his shit, and being like, oh, use the rope, like, we need a rope to do this. Like, he would constantly be telling us, me and her, how to play our characters. And she was kind of like non-confrontational. I'm very confrontational. So I was like, that's not okay, a kind of a thing. And we got into it really big in the group chat, and my DM shut it down. He was like, what you said was not okay. He asked me at one point if I was speaking English to him when I was clearly typing English to him. So I was like, that was racist. This was not okay. That was not okay. And my DM was like, all right, he's out. And kicked him out of the group. And then the other men that were seemingly fine in the beginning, but clearly not as this other person started being more alpha male, left on their own, because they realized that that wasn't a space for that.
Right.
And so it was a really good thing for him to do. And he didn't even know me, like, compared to this other person. He had been friends with this other person for a lot longer than me.
Mm,
But the minute that me and her were like, we're uncomfortable, he was like, out.
that's awesome.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was good.
So yeah, listen, be aware, and like, look, there's things, if you haven't lived these experiences, there's things you're not going to notice. But
Right.
you know, it is hard enough knowing, especially if you come into a space where people already know each other.
Right.
It's really hard to say this is a problem. It's easier to fade out. So if you know, be aware, if you start seeing a lot of women fade out of your groups, there's a reason.
Yes.
Start paying attention. Start
Yes.
asking questions. Um,
Absolutely.
if you've played with me in any of the games that I run, I have a server where I have like 3 Discord posts of rules. Um, and they are, and I have to explain this to some people because they don't understand it. My rules are not there because I am worried that people are going to break those rules. My rules are there so that people who come in and are worried about will this be a thing will see, oh, no, she's already aware that this, like, I have rules around racism, fantasy racism, and then like in world racism, right? So actual racism, no. Fantasy racism, where like, oh, I've never, like fantasy racism is where like you've got this huge massive world and there's like 2 black people in it, right? Like that no, we're you make your cultures diverse. Come on, like that.
Yes.
You know, if we're gonna play in a game where I kind of, I'm a white chick with some privilege. I like it when there's sometimes a little bit of racism for me. I like playing tieflings and people are suspicious of tieflings. Then I get to subvert a trope or, I enjoy that. Not everyone does. And if someone like I'm like if you want to
Yeah.
play a character who's got racist bias, cool, you need to tell everyone this and we all have to be on board of it. And if your fantasy racism, if your dislike of orcs or tieflings or drow start running too close to real world racism, we're cutting that out.
Yeah, and it's very, very. I don't think people understand the mental trauma of racism on people of color. So if you're gonna act that out as a table and like, hi, I could show up, and you have no idea I'm a person of color, so
Mm-hmm.
you don't think to tell me that you have this idea, and then I get caught off guard at a table.
Mm-hmm. And that's what that whole drama that I had with my thing. It was a character who was a monstrous race, and I was playing a halfling. And of course, a monstrous race character would probably be suspicious of halflings, but you have to be able to draw a line and be very. And that's why, like in Godplane, I'm like, please communicate with each other, right? Like
Yeah.
you got to be so wholesome in a horror campaign and just be like, I'm going to say something really, really terrible. I love you so much. It's not me. It's it's my character. I'm so sorry. Are you okay?
There's a reason that kink and TTRPGs are so closely aligned because they all have to do with consent and communication and being able to fully consent and communicate throughout the entire process.
Mm-hmm. And at one point, I forget even what. Oh, it was in my super wholesome, fluffy post nights game where I play my himbo bard. For the first time ever, he got like really mad and he like snapped at a character, and like, well, he's Fey, so like a thing happened that made him go Fey rage, and like after that session, I went and checked in with every player, and I'm like, I want you to know, he's not mad at so like, and everyone's like, yeah, we know. I'm like, cool, I'm just making sure because this is out of the ordinary, and I don't want. Thank you, Manhattan. I'm like, I don't want alarm bells to be going off, and I'm thinking it's all fine. David says, so I'm a dude, obviously, but I will say that is one thing that I do, even if everything is fine, check in. Like, be awkward, be heavy-handed, because there's so much stuff that as a man I don't understand about the lived experiences of women. I'd rather overcorrect in making a safe space. So in private, I do make sure and check in regularly with women, POC, and so on. And yeah, even
Yeah.
I'm playing a character in David's world, and I'm still occasionally checking in and being like, I did this thing. I've done a bunch of research. I think this is the way this would have reacted. I played it out this way. This is what I'm thinking. Is this okay? Right? Like, obviously, it's not okay in a stream game. I wouldn't do that in a stream game. I might play Roxy in a stream game, But the half orc is not going to be coded black. The half orc is just going to be like, this is a safe space where I can learn, and I have an incredible DM who's willing to teach me.
And that's so amazing. That's
It's
really
so
like that's an
it's
honor.
such a gift.
And that's if you have friends like I'm willing to do almost to a fault emotional labor for white people or men people um because I think that like it's important, you know, to me because it they got to learn. Someone's got to tell them, you know. And I don't mind doing that.
Yeah.
But don't expect it. You know what I mean? Don't be
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm gonna call my POC friend and ask them to check my campaign because they're a POC and they should do that for me. That's not okay.
And I mean, asking them, hey, you're a friend. Do you have the spoons to
Do
tell
you have
me?
the spoons? Right, exactly. Do you
And
have the
I
mental space to have the
realized
spoons?
I just had a conversation with someone who don't know what the spoons are. The spoons theory is like everything that you do. Like you start out, you know, you're at a diner and there's a bunch of spoons sitting at the table, and it was originally used to communicate living with disabilities, right? So, you know, I have a bunch of spoons, and I get sometimes like it's a really bad day, so I have to use a spoon to get out of bed, and then I have to use a spoon to make breakfast and take my medication. Then I have to do a spoon, and you get halfway through the day and you're out of spoons. And what happens when you're out of spoons?
Yes.
Another way to understand it is spell slots.
Right.
You know, so you know maybe for me, you know, I don't really unless people get really icky and personal, I don't mind talking about being ace, right? I can talk
Mm,
about being ace, and that's a cantrip for me. But for some people, it's a first level spell slot, and they can only do it
right.
so many times before they run out. So
Exactly.
that's a communication tool. I did. Ooh, I had one more. Oh, I wanted to touch on
Mm,
we talked this will be the final topic because we've gone, thank you, we're already at an hour and a half, but like, ooh, this topic I'm so excited for.
I'm all yours. Whatever you need, I am here.
So um we talked a little bit about, you know, art in TTRPGs and how, and magic, and how often, you know, comics too, you know, there's hey Lawrence, thanks for hanging out. So in TTRPGs, um there's a lot of unconscious bias towards male characters. And I've talked about this to a certain extent. Like, I love playing guy characters for multiple reasons. Number one, like, I'm I'm a lady type who kind of doesn't want to be a lady type, so it's kind of nice to not be in that skin and space for a while. That's really nice. Um, but also, like, especially on stream, people judge the actions of male coded characters so much more gently and so much more forgiving than female coded characters.
Mhm.
Um, but also, even I'm gonna reference, and if some of you, I'm hopefully gonna run it again soon, not as a one shot, but as maybe a 3 to 4 part game. But the Skyhold Tower one shot that you played with me in. When I first picked up that module, you know, I played it with a friend, and then she sent it to me because I'm like, this is such a great introductory. Like, that game, anyone new to TTRPG can play, and I love it. That's why I love it. It's super. But when I started really reading the module, I was like, there's exactly one woman character in this entire module, and she shows up and immediately casts a charm spell on you before even asking you for help. Everyone else in that game is a guy. The gnome who helps you, the wizard, all of that, like the assistant, all of them are guys. And I was like, I don't like that. And so I decided to fix it. So spoilers, if you haven't seen the module and you potentially are wanting to play it, maybe don't listen. But like, there's a portrait of an old wizard at the bottom, and you're in this and you're trying to figure out what happened to the wizard. And I said, well, what if I make this a really cool story where, as they climb the tower, they learn more and more about this wizard, and learned that throughout the course of their hundreds of years of flying this tower, the wizard transitioned and is now a woman. And it gave me this wonderful opportunity, like, and it was so much fun to watch players argue, because some this module you can dive super deep into. Do you dig out the mystery, or are you just like murder hoboing your way up? So if you do a lot of digging, you can start to find notes and bits about what happened, and the name switches partway through, and people are like, is she a money grub, right? Is she a black widow? Did she steal this thing? It becomes this fun. And certain people, Vivian was one of them, was like, they transitioned. It's the same person. Like, and they pick it up right away. Like, people who are like, people can identify it, and some people are like, I don't know, she must have started sleeping with him and then stole his tower.
Oh, yeah, it really depends on your perception of like so many people think discrimination is based off you, the person, like me, like it's not based off me. It has nothing to do with me. It has to do with their perception of me and what their experience is. And we see a lot of that in
Alright,
TTRPG
so we only
spaces,
have one
especially
night.
with like men who play girl characters. Lots of men play women characters, and there's a lot of the way they play them that tells you about that man. You know what I mean? Like, you're telling on yourself a lot when you do that. I'm just saying.
Definitely. And like, and so like, even with that, like, that was a cool opportunity to like be like, I don't see a lot of trans representation
Right.
in this space. And look, trans isn't necessarily a story that's mine to tell. I can tell snippets of it, but like, if I don't put it there somewhere and start normalizing it,
Right.
I have to wait until I am in a position where I can uplift, I can give money to a trans writer to tell their story. I don't have the money to do that yet, right? Like, eventually, I hope, I want to. Eventually, I would love, like, one of my goals is to have a charity and have enough money where I can send women, people of color, trans folks, queer folks, all around and run games and let them tell their stories and get paid to do it. That's my dream. I'm not there yet. Right now, I'm sitting here talking with Jen.
There's certain stories white people can't tell. They just can't. They can't do it. And we've had a lot of those conversations, especially with the stuff I'm working on about how it doesn't hit the same coming from, like, I could pass my ideas on to a white person, but they're not going to have the same nuance of an understanding of what I'm trying to say.
So telling the story of a character in a D&D campaign transitioning is not mine to tell, but telling a story where people can learn of the history of someone who transitioned, that I'm a little bit more equipped to do. And even if I just give someone a moment of like, oh, I misread that situation. Oh, I didn't understand what was happening, and maybe I could be a little more open and sympathetic. Okay, I've done a good thing. Not the best thing I could do. I can't afford to do the best thing I could do, but I'm excited to at least enact those small changes and hopefully watch them ripple out.
Yeah, sure.
But even with that, like I said, I opened that module and went, all the characters that you interact with for more than a split second are male.
Mm-hmm.
And modules are getting better about this. They really are. But D&D as a whole, people are hard-coded to reach for male characters.
Yes.
To be quest givers, to be opponents, like, and I was just talking to my amazing coworker today, and we were saying, stories shape us.
Yeah.
I forget clerics, bards are divine, because the stories are what tell us who we can be, who we can't be, who the world sees us as. Like, they are what shape us. And if you don't see people who look like yourself being the hero, being the villain, being like, it's so, now it can be done. Women have been projecting themselves into video games over white dudes.
Oh, don't even, yeah. Yep.
I love Final Fantasy. I have been like Cloud, I've been Squall, I forget his name with the monkey tail.
Final Fantasy is one that has tried really hard to have, 6 has Terra and Celeste, and there's lots of, they've tried. It's one of the few series I feel like that has done really well.
And it was the thing, but like for me, Final Fantasy 7 was like the thing, and it was like, I'm not like, I want to be Tifa, but I'm that. I don't need to be all that.
Link, yeah.
Definitely not Aerith. Yeah, Link. Like, there are so many, like, you can figure it out, but man, when you see it, like, I remember, and Quiet Manhattan, I remember, like, and I'm gonna say a spicy here, because I went and saw Wonder Woman in the theaters, and I don't think Wonder Woman is the best example I really don't. But I remember walking out of theaters with several full grown women who all looked at each other and went, is this what it's like to be a white man? Right? I watched that, and even though, the story wasn't about Wonder Woman, it was about Chris Pine's character, right? He was still the hero, right?
Oh, yeah, that
But
one. Yeah.
seeing Wonder Woman do all of that, like, we walked out of there being like, I can take on the world. Is this what it's like to watch a movie as a white guy?
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
and yeah, so that's we spend a lot of time telling people that heroes look a certain way, whether we mean to or not. So, how can you
Yeah.
help women? Write more strong women. Don't tell us how big their boobs are. Don't tell us how high their skirt is. Write strong women who, if you come on to them, they flirt back. Write strong women who, if you come on to them, they zap you and you never try it again. Write strong women who you come on to them and they're clueless about it.
Yes. And to keep right, if you're writing women of color, give them agency, please. Don't make like, and please just if you're gonna write a campaign, can we just stop with the Asian mysticism, the Orientalism of like all Asians are wise, whatever stuff. That would be good too.
Yes.
Let's expand. We can just be bums in stories, and that's fine.
What if
We
their
don't
big
have to-
boobs are important to the plot? That was my favorite. So in Samurai Champloo, there's that
Yes.
scene where Fu is
Yes.
running, and I was like, what is that? What the?
I mean, I'm all about boobas. Bring me all the boobas. Like
That's what I'm saying. Like there
but
should
that
be
can't be their entire personality.
right, and there should be strong, attractive women who live and bathe and exude their sexuality.
Well, real quick example, Luisa from Encanto, and I know that doesn't sound like it, but Luisa from Encanto is a very strong, muscular woman of color. And women of color, specifically, and I can't speak for Latin people, but specifically in those kind of countries, are seen as less feminine innately, simply because of the way their body is shaped. And then, so there's that conversation, and then you add in like white queer people who might not know any better. We're coding her as trans because that's their experience, and whether it's right or wrong, it really upset a lot of women of color, because women of color are so often seen as non-feminine because of situations like that. So
And like and again, intersectionality is so complex because a lot of people see a trans story in Cloud in Final Fantasy VII, and a lot of people see a trans story
Really?
in Cloud is
Really?
a trans icon,
I
and I'm
didn't
here
know
for
that.
it. Yeah.
Go Cloud. Interesting.
And so like there are so many, and like obviously Cloud was not intended to be that way, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong, right?
Right.
There's a really interesting there's important weird overlap dangerous spaces of like when you see that story you should grab it, especially if it's not given to you, but also don't take it away from other people who it's also their actualization.
Yeah, Encanto is a very good example of that, I think, because Encanto did a really good job with the generational trauma. So if you were in a family of immigrants that had recently been through something like that, like Latin people, like myself, because there was a lot of my mom. That's why my mom came here. A lot of stuff like that, in a different way. You take something different out of Encanto, and so then it becomes that intersectionality of like proximity to whiteness, not really understanding what that whole piece was about, and kind of being like, oh well, this kind of makes me feel a little bit like about my queer experience, and you're like, okay, cool, but like we don't need to overshadow each other, but we also need to understand like as a white person why that might make a person of color a little upset.
Yeah, is X-Men the story of the struggle of being black or queer or trans, or like, yes,
because we all have a shared trauma of not being normal or not being the standard, and that varies in degrees depending on what other intersections and layers we have with it. I mean, Rogue and Wolverine were how I was so young, but like that's when I kind of knew, you know what I mean?
I mean,
Like,
it was Kitty Pryde and Nightcrawler for me. So
yeah,
I went a
like,
weird way. I went a weird
yeah,
way.
that's okay though. Okay, it's all right. But then like the Mummy came out, and I was like, oh, definitely. Yeah.
I mean, did we talk about this? Like Labyrinth was like,
Ugh. Yes, also that one.
yeah, like, oh, Goblin King is hot. Also, Sarah is
Yeah,
pretty
like
awesome.
yeah, okay, and also yeah, okay, sure.
I,
Like I'm here
hmm,
for all
hmm.
of it. Yeah,
But
there's a lot of that that happening.
so, thank you all for hanging out. I can't believe how many folks we've had, like, just chilling and watching the stream and lurking. We've
Thank you
had so
for
many
being
amazing
here.
comments in chat. You know, we've been going a really long time. We're almost at 2 hours, so I'd
I'm
like
sorry.
to wrap. No, no, no. Thank you. Like, I'm sorry I kept you here for almost two
No,
full
you're
hours, but thank you for, like, thank you for being so honest and open and sharing your lived experience, because that's like I know for me it's often therapeutic to talk about this, but it's also emotional work and it's also making yourself vulnerable. And you did that for us, and thank you. Um,
fine.
those in chat, thank you for sharing your experiences, asking questions, contributing to this conversation. I really, the more I do of these Tuesday and D's, the more I really love the 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 questions people have and the things we talk about and how we wander and find ourselves in really amazing places. So thank you again. Um, I'm going to send us over here to Polyzena. She's playing Dead by Daylight. She's awesome. So
Ooh.
say hello. We're not late enough, but later tonight, we talked about amazing women. We talked about people of color. Coming up here later tonight, that bronze girl on her channel is going to be streaming Shakar, which is inspired by her experience in oh, I don't remember the state because I'm a horrible person, but it's a very East Asian inspired world. And it's just wonderful, and I love it so
Really
much.
good.
It's got Xander, it's got Gabe James Games, it's got Lord Balvin, it's got, oh, Youngles! Thank you for the sub! You're a guest! I need to be.
I did. What? Hold on. I've been gifting subs in your channel,
You
like, and
have, but
not even subbed myself. There's something wrong with that.
you're
I was
just too
speaking of.
generous.
Hold on. I'm gonna do
Just too
this.
generous.
Nope. Don't go anywhere yet.
And Persephiroth. Please check it out. I would rate us over, except she's not live yet. It's amazing. It's one of my favorite D&D streams ever. Thank you so much. Thank you to those of you hanging out. We're gonna start the raid. Thank you. Have a great night. Please come back next Tuesday. If you have topics that you would like us to cover, let us know. If you have guests or you would like to be a guest, please let us know. As you can see, I will drag you in if you volunteer. Happy International Women's Day. Tell a woman that you admire that she's awesome. Do be aware that non-binary people don't necessarily want to be grouped in with women, so keep that in mind.
That's
Be
yeah.
gentle and generous that way.
You
Vivian,
want
you
to
were
have that
amazing. Thank you
conversation.
so much for hanging out, and sending you over. We'll see you soon. Thank you all so much.